Welcome everybody to this episode of the Visual Content Marketing Show, where we explore how to integrate visual content into your digital marketing and communication plans. We uncover trends, technologies, and practical tips. And we're in for lots of treats today in terms of practical tips. And so I just want to introduce myself firstly. My name is Krishna Day, and I am your host for this show. And this episode is all about turning what you know into cash flow. In fact, perhaps you don't want to start with cash flow. Perhaps you want to start with actually attracting more leads into your organization. And let's just put a little bit of context around the episode for this time. Back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, I was working in a very large corporate, a global organization, and we were using online learning to keep people up to date and informed about changes that were going on, new practices, and it was a great way to keep people connected. I didn't anticipate that roll forward a few years on that I'd be in my own business and actually working with other organizations, actually either delivering programs or creating programs. And over the years, since the middle of 2000s, around in fact 2005, I've actually been creating content either for people on my own programs, or I've been delivering content for other organizations. But I'm actually noticing a significant change, particularly in the last year, where organizations are now requesting online training over and above, in fact, before they even ask about face-to-face training. And I've been getting quite a lot of questions from people around that approach. So I thought, well, let's explore that. So, for example, some of you here today, I know, are people who are hosting your own Hangouts on Air. And perhaps you've considered repurposing that content to be online learning, and perhaps you're doing that already. And particularly, I want to look at today in terms of programs where you're not there all the time. So it's a way that you can deliver on-demand training. But I thought, well, who could join me for this conversation? Because I find it's much more interesting to actually have somebody else or other people here, more than one people, to actually have this conversation about bringing their experience. So I want to introduce you in a moment or two to the person who's going to be with me here. But he comes from a really interesting background because his background is as a lawyer. And for the last 4 years, he's been delivering really successfully online training to people who actually want to get more effective in terms of passing their exams. And we'll hear more about that in a moment. But what he's done in the most recent years is also turn that knowledge, and he's been helping people all over the globe in terms of looking to take their programs and actually deliver online learning. Now, yes, he does have a program that we'll talk about a little later on, but today is all about trying to help you get ready to actually take your content, if it's what you want to do, in terms of online training and learning. And we'll come to some resources a little later on in the show. But firstly, let me introduce you to Greg. Greg, why don't you tell us all about your background? So Greg Smith, there's lots of Greg Smiths on Google+, so you'll find him under Greg Smith Lawyer, and you'll find him, if you're looking at the event page, there's a link there to his profile, although he's much more active in many other platforms. So Greg, thrilled that you're here all the way from Canada to be with us today. Let's start off with your story in terms of why you started to deliver online learning, particularly as you started off with a very different career.
Thanks. Well, it's great to be here. I appreciate the introduction. I guess if you're looking for the start of my story, you'd mentioned I've been doing online education for 4 years. Actually, the 4 years has been helping with others. I started doing my own online training about 10 years ago. And as you said, that started, well, actually, even before my career as a lawyer, I was teaching in the classroom, helping people prepare for their pre-law school exams, the LSAT, and eventually brought that into a blog online and got such wonderful feedback from students that we decided to turn it into an online course at a time when there really wasn't a lot of technology available for creating online courses. And it just it took off right away. I mean, the first month we did maybe $300 in sales, so not enough to quit my career path as a lawyer, but over the next couple of years, as a part-time project, we took it up to doing about 10,000 plus a month in sales, and that really gave us the indication that maybe there was something to this, and we dove into online education full-time, and eventually ended up leaving my career as a lawyer, and now all I do is online education. And I've moved beyond offering my own course. It's still out there, but because it's on demand, I really don't have to do anything for it. Now we just help others create their own online courses.
So, Greg, why don't we start off by exploring trends? And I said in the introduction that I'm noticing a significant trend that larger organizations are saying, put together online learning. That's what we want as a preference rather than in-person learning. And I know that you've been noticing some trends as well. So why don't you tell our audience what it is that you've been seeing, particularly as you're working with people all over the globe delivering their training programs?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with you more. Definitely organizations are looking for online training more and more, whether it's solely online training or that flipped classroom approach where you're getting some live workshops as well as online training. And it just, for so many reasons, it allows you so much better global reach, but also the technology out there is much better now in terms of offering online training. I mean, online training's been around for quite a long time, but really, as you said, only in the last few years has there really been this global acceptance, both at the corporate level, but also now at the individual level. You have things like these MOOCs, the massive open online courses through MIT and Harvard and other programs, and things like that, plus more and more universities and schools offering online training means that everybody is really starting to accept it, and in some places it's kind of created a bit of a gold rush of people going out and offering online courses to this much bigger market. It used to be just the corporate market in a limited sense, and now it's sort of everyone is open to, learning everything from professional skills all the way through to cooking or, soft skills as well.
Yeah, in fact, if I just think about my own experience, some actually certifications I've done for programs, even back in about 2003, 2004, I actually was able to do those certifications, even though we were international, I actually could do them online, and that was before we had some of the connection speeds that we have now and all the platforms. And in fact, at a very personal level, I actually have got twin daughters who have just gone into their kind of high school, so they're age 12, and they have all of their content, all of their books now are on the iPad, which is really interesting for me in terms of seeing that that's how they've transitioned. And in fact, it's really very rich media that they get there, because not only do they get the written word, but they've got inbuilt multimedia there as well. So you're right, there's such a real interesting shift. So it doesn't matter what sector we're in, I think we're starting to see this. Let's start off with actually exploring some of your learnings, perhaps, by actually moving from physical programs into online. If you think back to those early days, what were some of the things that you noticed as you were making that transition?
Transitioning from the real world to training online, I think first thing that I realized is you really do have to think marketing from the beginning. So I did it kind of just out of luck, in that I started with a blog, because initially I had no intention of offering an online course. I just had all these great resources and I put them out there for free, and that turned into quite a marketing engine. And that, when I released my first online course, meant that at the time I had a few hundred unique visitors a month, not much, but it was enough to sell a few courses. So I think when you are moving online, one of the first things you should be thinking about is marketing. Is if you want people to take your course, they're going to have to know about it. And as big as the internet is right now, if you don't have some kind of marketing, people just aren't going to find it, no matter how great it is. So that was one thing I learned, is you really need to think about that right from square one, and then all the way through the development of your course and continuing offering it.
Well, I know that we've got a lot of people here live on the event page, and some of them are already delivering online training. So I do invite you to put your questions for us to address over the next while, if you do have them, and also share your experiences in terms of things that have been going really well for you. So let's look then in terms of common mistakes. that people are making. And in fact, one of the things you've already alluded to there is the importance of marketing. So it's back to anything we do, we need to have a platform and build visibility for what we're doing. But you work with a lot of organizations these days in terms of taking their content, in terms of moving it online. So what are you seeing in terms of common issues that people have and errors really that we can help people avoid by our conversation today as they're starting to develop the online training programs that really, if we can avoid them, it can propel us much faster, much smoother as well.
Right. Well, as we've both mentioned now, the marketing side of things is huge, so I won't go into too much more into that, but thinking about that all the way through definitely is important. Another one is the length of training. A lot of people will take a half day, a 1 day, a 4 day workshop and try and just mash it into online training and offer it in a series of 10 2-hour videos, and that's too much. Now you can still accomplish the same level of training, but break it up into bite-sized pieces. So we typically go 3 to 7 minutes per video or per lesson, and even if someone is going to sit there and do a course for 3 hours online, at least every 3 to 7 minutes they've got a bit of a break. They finish a video, they finish a lesson, they get a little bit of feedback that encourages them, okay, you're now 5%, 10% done this course. And so by breaking it up into those bite-sized pieces, we dramatically improve our completion times, or completion rates. Another one is to use video as much as possible. If you can get some video into the lectures, PowerPoint with voiceover can work if it's done well, but I find including a little bit of video, even just as an introduction and a few places throughout the course, gives a little bit of a personal touch. People engage a little bit more. They can make eye contact, feel like they're working with a real person, and that also helps to increase your completion rates.
So, Greg, let's get into some very specific things. I know we've got some questions coming through around online course development, and I thought I'd ask you to share maybe 3 or 4 key tips that you would have. Let's say if you were starting off today knowing everything that you know, and you had that program that was working for lawyers, and you've given us some ideas about making sure we break it up into bite-sized chunks, and also putting some video content in there and a way for people to easily consume it. I want to come back to that, but let's look at specifically in terms of starting to think about the curriculum. What tips can you give us about, let's say somebody's got a half-a-day program and we now want to take that into an on-demand program? What's the best ways to start to structure it? Because I think it's very, very different. I know it's very different because I deliver online, but I also deliver in terms of, in real life. And for me, it's very different in terms of those audiences. And then if it's a live audience, it's online, that's different again. But let's stick with on-demand, online programs. How could you start to develop that curriculum?
Right. Well, I mean, one thing to think about is that you really can take a lot of the stuff that you do live and find a way to do it online. So in some of the people we work with, they run workshops where they have a case study, for example, and they feel as soon as they're going online, somehow they can't do this case study. And then we talk a little bit more about, well, how do you implement the case study in the classroom? And usually it's, well, I talk a little bit about what we're going to do. I give them a handout. They go away, maybe in groups. They work on the questions for the case study. They come back, and we kind of discuss what I would expect out of that case study. And often at that point, I say, well, you can do exactly this online. So you can have a video where you introduce the case study. Then you can have them download a PDF where they have the case study and the questions. They can go and work on it either on their own or potentially in a group. They can come back either half an hour later or 3 days later, because with the online on demand, you can give them as much time as you want. And then you can have a video or a lesson where you now review what you would expect out of that. And if you want to have more engagement, you can even have a forum where people actually discuss the results of it. So one of the first things is recognizing that a lot of the stuff you do live that might not intuitively feel like you could bring it online, you probably can if you take a little bit of time and think about how to implement that. Another one is recognizing that as opposed to live online or live in person, there's no scheduled time when you start doing on demand. And that's got its pros and cons. On the pro side, people can take it any time in any time zone from any country, and they can take it piecemeal. They can work through it as is best for them, which really helps with attention span and also completing and actually absorbing all the information. On the downside for us as marketers and trying to get our course out there, if you don't have a scheduled time for your course, whether it's live, online, or in person, it takes away a bit of that urgency to buy or to sign up or to participate. If I know that this that you're offering a course that's only available tomorrow at 10 a.m. and you're never going to show it again, well, then I'll probably show up at that time, even have to move a few things around, and I'll put it in my schedule. Without that urgency, it can be a little bit harder to get people to sign up, so you have to work around that. And one of those ways is just by constantly adding value and getting in touch with them. So once you have the leads, the people who are interested, to continually follow up, offer them value, offer them hints as to what's in the course, remind them that it's available and that it's available anytime. So getting over that urgency bump as well, and offering them the value of that lack of urgency, that they can actually take it anytime, and letting them know, well, you can start it and only do 5 minutes now, as opposed to having to commit to a 2-hour time block or something.
Yeah, I think that piece in terms of helping people consume the program is really important, and something that many people forget, because if people don't go through the program and don't actually get benefit from it, then that's not good for your reputation. And I always remember something that we did for a program. It was probably back about 2005 now, and we had about 800 people who participated all over the world. And we actually learned a lot from them in terms of going through that program about what was the best way to deliver it. And at that stage, we also made the content available not just in terms of streaming video, because at that stage not everybody had that access to that. And that's also a consideration if you're looking at actually people in different parts of the world these days where they've got different access availability. And increasingly now, I'd be looking at making sure that that content is viewable on mobile devices. Just as I mentioned about my children being on iPads, I know there are certain parts of the world where they're more likely to consume your content on a mobile phone, so on a smartphone. So that's an important consideration. But I think ways to help people consume, and let me just give you a tip that we did back even just the early days of that program. We actually, in that particular case, even though it was on demand, we had different times in terms of several times of the year that people could come into that program. So we held it slightly differently because we wanted to kind of keep momentum, because yes, there is a time and a place where you just allow anybody to come in to programs and they can work their way through it. But we knew, because of that audience, and that's the important thing I think for us to work out who the audience is and learn more about them, and we actually put them together in little study groups, in little teams. And so we had a mixed format, so that we also had an opportunity, really, and it was just because we wanted to get people to come through the program. It was a reasonably expensive investment. It was about $1,000 to $1,200 US at the time, which was quite a significant investment for a program. And we wanted to make sure people got through that. So we put some infrastructure in place, which was both online forums, but it was also, it had a team leader, so people could check in with them and also hold each other accountable to work through the program. Because we would see quite a significant drop-off from people saying, I've got this intent, I'm going to make a purchase, to not seeing it through. And, hand up, I've been one of those people too. And perhaps I'm the only one as taking part today who's ever been in that situation where I bought something but I haven't seen the training through. And we get busy, we get moving on, and so unless it's something, and I think for your own experience, Greg, because you were doing some around law, and people wanted to study for their exams, there was a real impetus there. If it's broader training, and it could be, as I teach, which is digital communication skills, but it could be, all sorts of skills that you're teaching. Unless there's some, real benefit at the end of it, I think it's incumbent on us as the owners of the program to really try to help people go through that. And in fact, there's a comment there on the stream today about somebody saying their curriculum is driven by the fact of the organization that they're working for, because there's an official curriculum they have to work through. I don't know if you've done anything like that, in terms of having mixed approaches, Greg, as I'd suggested, that we had great success by really trying to hold people accountable to go through the program.
Yeah, definitely. The cohort system works really well. We have a few people we work with that do cohorts, whether it's one a month or one a quarter, and then they can have someone come in and manage the cohort as a tutor or mentor. Plus, all the students can then work together a little bit. And in fact, I've seen a lot of that on the corporate side, but even on the on the personal marketing and sort of individual business training for profit side. Marie Forleo, who's one of the bigger online educators, she has the B School. I believe her registration for her course, for her B School online course, is available only for a 2-week period once a year. So she does marketing all year long leading up to this 2-year period, and then she sells almost exclusively through affiliate marketers, and they only open that registration for a 2-week period, and that works exceptionally well for her. She sells thousands of courses in the sort of $2,000 plus range by closing off that registration period and creating that sense of urgency, and then creating a cohort then that works together through the course.
So any other ways then, Greg, that you help people kind of go through the program? Let's think about maybe some mixed media formats and questionnaires. And so, for example, I know there's a comment here today about the fact of somebody actually had taken a program. I'm just reading out the comments, but the chunks of content were really long, and people were expected to get 100% in their multiple choice questions, even though some of them were not necessarily what they felt were relevant in terms of it. So in that particular case, and thanks for sharing those comments, they actually made a decision not to go ahead with the program. So I think there's any other thoughts before we move on to our next topic in this area, Greg?
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge issue getting people to move through and complete, especially when you have that on-demand program. And you look at the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, and their completion rates are typically between 7 and 14%. So only 7 to 14% are actually finishing those courses. With the ones we've been putting together, we're typically seeing 85 to 95%. And I would say the biggest reasons around that are length of content. So if you're offering, with the MOOCs, they'll offer a 1-hour video lesson, 2-hour video lesson. With us, I said 3 to 7 minutes. And then we actually break up the lecture, as you said, with some other forms of multimedia, so quizzes and surveys. However, we don't generally require, a few people need this because they're doing some kind of certification, so they need a certain pass rate. But for most people, we say don't have a pass rate or have a block that people can't continue moving on and learning. They can always come back and do it later if you need them to. But we do very short quizzes, and there's no particular pass grade required. So if we do a 3 to 7 minute video, we might follow that with a multiple choice quiz with 1 or 2 questions. And the questions are usually quite easy. They're mostly there not as an assessment, as what you would find in school, but as formative learning, as in this is a continuation of the learning process. We just want to reiterate some of the basic concepts you learned in the previous lesson to ensure that you're following along. And that does a few things. One, it gives you a little bit of encouragement and feedback because generally the questions are easy. It encourages you to pay attention because you know those questions are coming up. And then it forces you to kind of work through it and learn by doing a little bit. So we find that actually increase considerably. And then another big thing that we do is work in gamification. And so when I say gamification, sometimes people take that the wrong way. I don't mean specifically having games like video games. More gamification in the way that you would find in LinkedIn. So LinkedIn does an amazing job of giving you, when you first sign up, it gives you a progress bar, tells you the percentage complete you are. It's always telling you what that next step is and giving you a little pat on the shoulder to complete the next step. So we do the same thing in the online courses. As they move through, you should be letting them know the percentage complete they are, maybe of this chapter and of the overall course, how much they have left to go, so they can visually see what's left to be done, either in the chapter or in the whole course. And that way people can set their own mental goals of, okay, I'm going to finish this chapter tonight, and then I'll get on to the rest tomorrow. But giving that gamification sort of pats on the back and encouragement, and also showing them the progress they're making helps quite a bit for completion. And actually, the final point on that I would say is, especially if it's on demand and they're coming and going to and from the course, is email reminders and follow-ups. So if you can send out reminders saying, you're 30% of the way through the course, or the course is ending in a month or in a week, or it's been 2 weeks, giving them that follow-up and encouragement to come back and just reminding them it's there and how far through they are works really well as well.
So you mentioned there about reminding people that the course is coming to an end. Have you seen that some of the people that you work with say, you're going to start on this day and it finishes on this day, and you need to complete in that time outside of the situation where it's certification? And how easy is it to kind of say, it's only going to be for, let's say, 60 days or 45 days, and at the end of that, that's when you need to have completed the course by?
Yeah, more on the corporate and certification and completion, or have I seen that limited window of completion for a course? The trend on buying for personal growth or personal improvement, where the consumer is really pulling out their own credit card, is have these 1 year or lifetime access courses. I don't know that that's necessarily a great thing. I think you could do a mix. Because when you give that deadline to finish, you really do see an increase in usage and engagement and completion and real value to the person taking the course. So some people are doing a bit of a mix where they have deadlines, they have goals, and if you hit those goals, maybe you get something more, like an extra lesson, or you're advanced, or you get continued access to the course as an ongoing review resource. But you can give them both that sort of ongoing access, but also give them somewhat of a deadline along the way to finish it, and that'll really increase your completion and engagement rates.
One of the things that I was thinking of there when you were going through some tips for us was that if I was watching this show, I'd say, I've got this good idea, and actually I think it could be an online program. I could build it into that. I know there's no rule of thumb, but with all the experience and all the people that you've worked with, do you think there's a great way to start off? I mean, let's say, don't try and do the biggest, humongous program. So you mentioned somebody before who I know has got a really good program and it's quite an investment, but that takes a long time to develop. And in my experience, is if we do that, we may never ourselves get that to be finished, and things move on, and that's not a profitable use of our time. And if we're new to online learning in terms of delivering this way, I sometimes find by even the course instructor kind of chunking down the content to become something that's consumable, and then they can get some feedback about whether their content works and what people like, particularly if they've never delivered online programs, is sometimes a better option. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have a sense of, if somebody was starting off, what's perhaps a good duration in total for a program? And really, I'm trying to help people understand what might it take to get them from a standing start where they've got nothing to actually getting their first program online.
Right, and I think that's definitely a good point to make, is you don't necessarily want to set out to build your 80-hour epic course right off the bat and spend 2 years in the basement before you even get out there and see if people want to even learn that. So some of the things I've seen that works is people releasing a smaller version of a course or a course that's not quite ready in a pre-sale, and they're upfront with everyone saying, I'm working on this course, here's what I've got so far, you've got enough to get in and start learning, I'll keep adding material over time, and it's all going to be released by the end of October or something. And as you get more people signed up for your course and jumping in, you personally get more encouraged, especially if you're selling it, because you think, oh, there's another $100, another $100, another student who's asking questions and who likes my content. I'm now encouraged to get over the motivational hump and finish my course. So that can work well. In terms of the actual length, I've seen people put together a 5-minute or even a 3-minute intro video that just says, this is what you're going to learn in the course. There's a special, it's not done yet, it's going to be released on this date. If you get it now, this is everything you're going to get. Sign up now. And it gives them a bit of feedback as to whether they can find people who want to learn this and whether people really want to learn this. So even just with a little 3-minute introduction that you can record from your webcam and microphone, you can start to test the market and find out. And again, as you get that encouragement, then you go out and build the rest of the curriculum. I would say if you're going to do that, and especially if you're going to charge people at that stage, you should have a plan for what that final curriculum is going to be. You're going to want to show them what that is, and that works well. In terms of a length of the courses, I'm finding a lot of people are doing well in the sort of 45-minute to 3-hour range of finished product courses. Any longer than that, and you would be probably better to break it into level 1, level 2. Even at the 3-hour level, I would probably say break that into 2 courses. You can always sell it as a package and say, I've got now 12 hours of content that's split over 8 courses, and you're going to get it as a package, or you can buy them individually. But when you start getting up over that 2-3 hour mark, unless someone really needs that education for certification or some requirement of employment, you're going to have a harder time selling them on the idea of sitting down for 12 hours. So this sort of 45 minutes to 3-hour range is a pretty good mark. And then for that pre-sale, you can go as little as 2 or 3 minutes just telling people what they're going to get.
Well, in fact, that also leads us into the thing on pricing, because to get people, I mean, I think about some of the programs I've done over the years, and that had quite a significant price tag to it, a couple of thousand US dollars, for example. But to do that, that person had built up a reputation with me. They'd really got me hungry for actually participating in the program. They'd done some things very tactically about actually, in fact, in this particular one I'm thinking of, they only had once a year that they actually ran the course, and they had a waiting list for people to get into the program. And they did have a guarantee program, so you could actually opt out if you didn't find it was for you. And usually the reason that people opted out of that particular program is, and they captured all of the feedback, which I think was really useful, because they turned the feedback they got into into sales content, and it was usually about there was too much content, and that's why people opted out of it. But that was quite a significant program versus actually starting off with something smaller, because I know another thing that people often struggle with is, well, how much should I charge? And so by putting that smaller program together, then you can do some research, you can have a look at what other organizations might be charging. And there's lots of online kind of platforms these days that people are using, but also that can help you actually make a decision, and therefore actually grow that audience with you. People who then say, I really like that, and then actually when you release the next program, that people then are more likely to want to join you, perhaps actually grow with you as you develop your program, because unless you're known, unless people know that content, it's going to be quite a challenge to bring people in, unless it's a program. For example, I deliver some online training for an organization, and it's a postgraduate program, so it's certificated and so on. So in that particular case, there's a reputation that goes with it, and people want the qualification. So perhaps you can give us some ideas then, Greg, around what practical tips you would suggest in terms of pricing our first programs.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I've seen a pretty wide range of pricing. Let's look first at maybe some of the reasons why you would, or some of the factors in your marketplace that might affect your pricing. So the first would be the size of your market, and another would be who is actually paying for it. So if we look at those two, they're pretty big factors in influencing your price. If you have a really large market, if you're really going after the entire consumer mass market, you're probably going to want to price a little bit lower because you have a much greater reach. You have the opportunity for much larger sales volume. So if you price a little bit lower, there's just more likelihood of thousands of people picking up on it. And so when you're marketing to the mass consumers, also the other factor comes in there. In mass consumer market, a lot of these people are just pulling out their own personal credit card and paying for it themselves, which also would bring your price point down a little bit. So in that range where you're talking mass consumer and they're paying for it themselves, I see a lot of courses in the sort of $25 to $75 per hour. Now, again, this is before you've built up that reputation. If you're not doing some exceptional marketing strategy where you're really building that draw, this is just getting out your first course in the sort of $25 to $75 for that first hour course, where big market, people paying themselves. If you go into smaller niche markets where there's less available, or you have a real expertise, or you're somewhat a little bit more known, and the employer is paying, or the employer is paying for the bill, you can go higher price point. And I've seen $75 and up, $150 an hour, and even much more. I've seen a few at sort of the 2-3 hour mark that are $600-700. And then as you get more content, like the course you were talking about, where you get up into the many hours of content as a real program, and you're maybe releasing it once a year, and you've developed much more rapport with your customers, you can go into the $1,000-2,000 plus range. So there is quite a range of pricing there, but it's thinking about the size of your market, whether it's a real niche, who's paying for it, and what kind of rapport you've built up with your customers. So the smaller the market, the more likely the employer is going to pay for it. Or if you have amazing rapport, then you can move that price point up considerably.
So let's talk about how we might deliver the course. So we've had some ideas so far about identifying what we could run as a program, how we can start to develop that curriculum, what we might do to attract people into it, some ideas in terms of pricing. But there's different ways that we could actually deliver that content, particularly if it's on demand. So if I go back to my first days in terms of delivering programs outside of the corporate enterprise, we were using platforms like Moodle. So I actually had installed my own open source platform, so that's being used by lots of universities and colleges and schools as a learning support system where you can put all of your programs and all of your content, and that is available for us all to use. Let's dial forward. One of the things we start to see the development of were, because you mentioned about blogs, so a lot of people got into blogging, and there's membership software, membership tools that people start to use hosted on their own blogs, and actually either doing drip feed of content or having all the content delivered that way. So I've done that on online websites, kind of developed on WordPress, and I've had the full curriculum delivered there in a password protected area. We're actually also seeing other platforms like Udemy and many others develop as well. And I know we're going to talk about your platform as well, because that's one of the ways that you can help people, is actually you've taken what you developed for yourself and actually you've made it available, which is great for other people to use. And I think it's a fantastic platform, which is one of the things I want to talk about today. But what are some of the considerations that people should have, particularly if they're just getting started off? So they're not going into this big, $2,000 program that they're going to retail, but they're actually going to be starting off with something, let's say, under 100 US dollars. What considerations should they have if they're thinking about delivering this? And it's going to be multimedia. They're going to have some of the things that we've talked about today, about having segments of that program and ways to keep people connected. Give us a list of things that we should have as an exploration in terms of, does this software do this and this and this and this?
Yeah, okay. Well, one thing is to consider, first of all, where you want to put it and under whose brand. So you mentioned Udemy, and there's other sites out like that where you can go and put your course on someone else's site. And one of the benefits of that is they sometimes will bring customers to you. So they do a bit of the marketing for you. The drawback to doing that, and one thing to consider, is whose brand do you want to be building, whose audience do you want to be building, whose business do you want to be building. When you put it on another site like that, the benefit is they bring some customers. The drawback is they own the business, they own the brand, they own the customers. So if you want to be building your own business and brand and customers, then doing it, make sure you can do it under your own brand, where when those people sign up, the email list is yours, the customer data is yours, as opposed to farming that out to someone else. The other thing that occurs there usually is you give up typically 75% of your revenue in exchange for putting it on their site under their brand and having them do a bit of the marketing for you. So there's a trade-off there in considering what you want to be building. If you are just doing this as a one-off with no interest in really building a business or generating any leads or customer relationships, then putting it on someone else's site under their brand can be a great way to go, because they might actually help drive a little bit of sales to your course. If you're doing it where you want that relationship with the customers, you want to actually grow a business out of this and earn that ongoing revenue and have some control over how it goes in the future, then doing it under your brand is definitely something you want to consider. I know a lot of the people who work with sites like Udemy, they're initially excited about it, and then in the long run they see some frustrations because they have no control. They don't even control the pricing. So often their $500 20-hour course will be sold for $2 because they don't have control over pricing and discounting and things like that. So control is one thing, and again, back to owning your brand is something to consider. Another is, what are your technical resources? So if you're very technically capable, or you have a developer on staff or administrative staff who can handle it, then you have a little bit more leeway to play with products like Moodle or say one of the member sites in blogs like Wishlist, because when you go down that road, you're really going to start piecing together a variety of different products in order to achieve the result that you want at the end. So something like Wishlist, which establishes a member portal in WordPress, you're now going to need to add payments. You're going to need to add the actual educational component of it, and each of these is, and then hosting, video delivery, probably some analytics, and each of these is going to be a different product that you're going to be mashing together. So you probably want to have a strong technical background if you're going to be piecing together pieces like that. Another thing, I think really probably the most important thing to consider in putting this all together is what do you want your end user experience to be? And I know, Moodle being open source, great, it's free. One of the concerns there that a lot of people I've seen use it, and I've used it in the past, is that the end user experience is not a beautiful learning experience necessarily. Now you can tweak it and play with it, but what helps with completion and engagement and referrals and even sales to begin with is if you give people a beautiful package where they can really get a beautiful experience around the learning. You're going to put a lot of work into putting together your videos or your lessons or your multimedia. Package that up in something that really looks good and gives a great experience to that end user, and you'll sell more and have a better experience. And then on your end, from the administrative side, when you're looking at software, take a look at the admin side and what it's going to take to administer it. I know that we've had a number of people look at some of the bigger programs, Blackboard, Desire to Learn, even Moodle, and looked at it and said, this is going to require some admin staff to be managing this. So for myself, when I was starting out, it was just going to be me teaching and administering it. So I wanted something that I could deal with myself and basically have very, very low admin overhead. And so for me, that meant having one piece of software that did everything all in one place, and really not a lot of a ton of customization that I needed to do and building and changing things. It was just going to do everything I needed. So if you know what you need, if you need payment processing and you need help with marketing tools and you need a good end user experience and you want some interaction between the students and you want to be able to deliver multimedia and you want to do it onto your site and under your brand, then look for something that does all of that in one place as opposed to picking up half of that and having to go and add piecemeal as you go.
Well, in fact, that's how I came across you, and we should tell people about your platform called Thinkific. And I actually found it's a really good platform for people who actually even want to do a free program. So some people might be saying, well, I'm not sure I'm actually got the confidence yet, or I maybe want to build more of a platform myself to actually bring people into something for free, but I want to be able to use that content and maybe repurpose content that they've got to actually deliver something which also can help them generate leads. And what I think is really intriguing, Greg, is that you've basically, you and your colleagues, built a platform that you were using. And then in the last couple of years, you've actually now enabled other people to use that platform. I know that wasn't your actual plan at the beginning, but I love the fact that you actually have software that people can use, and it's mobile responsive, that they can use for free, or if they want to, they can actually then go into a paid-for version, which you also have built in things like, if you do want to do things like referring people, having an affiliate payment, so that means if somebody else refers your program on, let's say a past student, they can get rewarded, and you've built that in, and you've built in a way to take payments, and you've built in a way to do email capture. And I know you've got quite a number of email integrations, and there's more to come. So why don't you tell people a little bit more about that, and we'll put a link in the notes as well where people can actually find out more about it. But I think it's a really good platform if you don't want to have that situation where there's you've got to build the infrastructure. And I have to say, yes, I've used Moodle, and yes, I've got Wishlist Member, and I personally haven't used Udemy, and that is a good platform that some people might want to use that. But I just thought this is a great opportunity to introduce people to your platform. So why don't you tell people a little bit more about Thinkific?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Well, as you mentioned, we built it based around our own needs. We had been looking for a long time for something that did everything we needed and really couldn't find anything that came close. So we built the software around our own needs, and really, and then over time that's evolved in adding in what other experts' needs are and trying to meet everyone's requirements, basically to offer courses under your own brand, on your own website, and the ability to build your own audience. And so everything that you need to kind of create your own business, your own audience, and own that business on your site under your brand is what we do. So that includes giving you all sorts of marketing tools right off the bat, so it makes it easier to get marketing your course, integrating, as you said, with software like MailChimp or Aweber for email campaigns, giving detailed analytics, which I find helps quite a bit for making decisions about the courses that you launch, improving your courses, and then improving your marketing campaigns, so you can see everything that's going on in the course with all of your students. And then, of course, the basic things like giving the ability for people to actually check out the courses is something I found surprisingly missing in a lot of online course programs. There's no way to actually see what you're going to get. So there's a bit of a trust hurdle to overcome on the internet. So we want to make sure that in all of our courses, people can check it out. They can watch an intro video or a demo, see the course curriculum, see what they're going to get. People are expecting to do this. When they buy a course in life, they get to, or live, they get to read through the curriculum and find out what they're going to get. They get to see how it's going to work. Am I going to go to a classroom? So we give them that experience online, the ability to evaluate it, the potential for a free trial if you want to offer that, and then, of course, the ability to take payment. So everything we do, the payment just goes right through into your bank account when you sell a copy of your course. And then, of course, based on what we found, we wanted to give people a really beautiful student experience. So the student experience that surrounds your lectures, everything that is, the actual delivery software is a great experience for your end learners. Really simple to use. We serve demographics across the board from, teenagers and actually younger, all the way through to the retirement and beyond demographics. And people have found our interface really easy to interact with and use, which I think is important. You don't want people getting stuck on the software when really what they're there is to absorb and learn from your material.
I think the other thing that I really like is the fact that this can be integrated in your own website. So if you do have a website or a blog, you actually can market it from there. So you're not sending people to a third party or a third place, which might be what you want to do, and that's fine, and there's platforms you can use like that. Yep. But this means that you can control in terms of what people see, because sometimes you don't necessarily want to have your content among a wash of other content, because then that might distract somebody and actually they move off to something else. Whereas if you're working hard in terms of marketing that program, and it maybe you're doing some speaking and you talk about it, or maybe you're writing about it, or you've got some video content that you're sharing about it, or there's information on your blog, for example, in terms of different places that you can direct people, you want people to go to there and really be less distracted. Because I know it's so easy to actually find ourselves burrowing off down a place that we've done lots of clicks of the mouse or finger touches on our mobile devices these days.
Yep.
So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, in terms of, Greg, you tell us about how that works then.
Well, it's a pretty simple process to offering it on your site. Essentially, when you come to Thinkific and create your course site, initially it's at a subdomain of our website. We set it up for you. You can customize all of the branding so that the look and feel looks just like your site. And then it's about a 5-10 minute process to integrate that into your website. It's not technically challenging. You don't require a developer. You basically just flick a couple of switches and it now appears on your site, on your URL. So it's just an extension of your website with the same look and feel and branding. So it would be something like, courses.yourwebsite.com, and that would be where your course experience was. So you can have your website as it is, still doing all of the selling or blogging or other resources that you're providing, and then just have a whole area specifically set aside for learning and courses. Oh, I think I've got you muted there.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm just going over to having a look at the comments here, and in fact, so we've got some questions about what's it called. So the platform called Thinkific, and I've put a link to that in the event page. Somebody is saying, "Oh, it looks like it rocks." Thank you. Somebody else has been talking about the programs that they've been delivering and how they've been able to deliver it at a significant fee because of obviously the type of program that they've done. We've also got some questions here around the tool in terms of Thinkific, about does it allow you to bring Hangouts on Air into the tool. So let's just talk about that for a minute, because I knew this would be a question that would come up. And I've got a couple of thoughts on it, and then I'm going to pass it back to yourself, Greg. Firstly, if you're going to be bringing in your content from Hangouts on Air, remember that you've got the replay. So providing the Google gods play nicely with us, we'll have a replay eventually after this show, should be immediately, in fact, I should say, and it will be over on YouTube. And as the host of that show, you are able to download that content. And also then you could put that into segments. So you could do a Hangout on Air. You could actually deliver the content in terms of privately, or you could do it publicly. And then you could repurpose that content and think about the tips we've given you today. And Greg was suggesting that we break it up into smaller pieces. So you could then repurpose it. Just a thought for you, though. If you are going to do that and you've got other people who are in your show, it's not just you on your own, you need to make sure that you've got an agreement in terms of rights. So as an example, Greg is here on this show with me, and prior to him coming here, he and I have had a discussion, and he's seen some information from me about what's going to happen after this show ends, and that I've said up front to him what I plan to do, and that might be now or in the future. So, for example, I might repurpose this in terms of shorter segments. I might put this into a membership platform. I could take this into podcasts, but I've cleared that up front. And so if you're going to do that with your Hangouts on Air, make sure that you've actually talked to the people and got their agreement about what they have agreed to, because Greg has given freely of his time today and his expertise, and he could equally have said, I don't want to talk about certain things because I get paid to talk about that. And you'll find that a lot with people who are professional speakers. So I'm a professional speaker, I get paid to speak, but there'll be some things that I perhaps wouldn't cover in something that's going to be freely available. I could choose not to do that. Now, I typically haven't found myself in that situation, but I know that that's sometimes the people will say, no, I don't want you to record this, or I'm happy to have this conversation, but certain things I'm not going to talk about because about how you're planning to do it. So yes, you could take your content from your Hangouts on Air and repurpose it in the ways that we've talked about, but make sure you've got a release statement from anybody who's appearing with you. So that's my little piece on Hangouts on Air. What about yourself, Greg? Because I know that you deliver content in many different formats.
Yeah, and we've set our system up, Thinkific, so that you can put pretty much any kind of media in. So no problem putting in Hangouts, repurposing it, even cutting it up, and delivering it through our system. We've got some specific types of content that we actually help you develop. Things like video. So if you upload a video through our system, we actually re-encode it into multiple formats so that it works on every device and even on different internet connections. So depending on your internet connection, we'll deliver a different media file to optimize for that person's experience. But then we also have open-ended media so that you can take pretty much anything from a YouTube video to any other video player or any other kind of download or content, even just straight up audio files, and drop them into the course and deliver them.
And that's really powerful because, again, having delivered this kind of content before myself and continue to create this kind of content, if you're going to host some of these yourself, there's absolutely a time and a place for YouTube, and it's a great platform. But if you want to have your content only available to people who've got access to it, then you might want to think about a third-party tool, or do as I do. I actually use Amazon S3 to host some of my private content. And so rather than having to worry about that, that's another thing that I thought was great, because, Greg, you handle all of that for people.
Yeah, everything. Basically, it's one-stop shop. So you don't have to worry about hosting or payment processing or any of that kind of stuff. It's all handled by our system automatically. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time together. Thank you, everybody, for the questions you've had. If you do have follow-up questions, do ask them here on the event page, or come to myself or Greg privately, and we'll be able to cover off those questions for you. And I know I'd certainly welcome you leaving your thoughts and feedback for Greg, because he's been very generous in terms of the time that he spent with us today. If you do have questions, leave them here, or as I said, send them to us privately. Greg, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you? And I know that you were, I've put the link in for people to find out more about Thinkific. If there's anything else that you want to say about that, and particularly in terms of any other support that you want to offer people, because I know that you do provide that kind of support to people. Yeah, no, I'm happy. Email's probably usually the best way to reach me, greg@thinkific.com. So you can reach me via that, and I'm always happy to help people. I'm not one of those who, I don't generally charge for my time in terms of teaching and training. We actually have a whole series of free courses coming out around YouTube marketing and autoresponder emails and stuff that we deliver for free. So happy to have people email me. Again, it's greg@thinkific.com. And always happy to help people with questions on developing and creating and distributing online courses.
So just as we wrap up, everybody, as you know, I like to always wrap up to kind of say, what are you going to do having been with us today? I hope we've inspired you with some ideas that you might go away and might start to think about turning what you know into cash flow, as I talked about this session being, or perhaps it starts off with turning what you know in terms of attracting more leads, and for some of you maybe repurposing your Hangouts on Air into short online programs that could be for free or for paid. We've given you some ideas of tools that you can use as well, and so you might want to consider what you might adopt, adapt and apply in terms of the areas that we've talked about. I really love to hear about what you decide to do afterwards, so I'd certainly welcome that. And if you've got specific questions that are follow-up, just so you know, I actually host helpouts, and you can find me at helpoutsformarketing.com. So if you do have a question that you want a face-to-face conversation with me, you'll find me over at Helpouts, and there's a number of different ones that I do there, some specifically on digital marketing and social media communications. So you can book some time with me there and take this conversation a step further, and as Greg has generously said, you can also contact him. So I do hope you've enjoyed being with us today in terms of for this episode of the Visual Content Marketing Show, and I look forward to being in contact with you again in the future. Watch out for our next episode where again we'll talk about tools, techniques, strategies and practical tips for you to use visual content marketing in your communications. And you know, there's no better way, as we've talked about today, in terms of using visual content to actually deliver your online programs. So do keep us posted. Let us know how you get on in terms of taking some of the ideas forward. Thank you so much to everybody who's commented, and those of you who've left links to the programs that you've been delivering and sharing your expertise. And thanks again, Greg, for being such a terrific guest with us here on this episode of the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.